G'day, Binanceans, and welcome back to this week's Binance Beach. On this episode, we're doing something a bit different. We usually host industry experts and boffins talking about whatever's going on in crypto and Bitcoin. But for this week, I thought I would invite one of my good friends, Jacko, on to the show. Welcome, Jacko. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man.
And the reason that I've asked Jackson to jump on today is because we've been friends for quite a while. Jack actually played my wedding back in the day. He's a brilliant musician, very talented man. But we started talking last year kind of about Bitcoin, and you've gone down the rabbit hole of what is Bitcoin. And I think you can safely say you've been orange pilled. And so I thought it would be a really good chat to have you on the show and talk a little bit about your journey and how that happened and how it's changed your worldview and what you see as, the things that you're working on in your life and, how Bitcoin's changed your worldview a little bit more. So that's the pre-ramble for the show. But, it's great to have you on. Let's start at the top. When did you first hear about Bitcoin? Do you remember the first time you heard about Bitcoin?
Man, I don't remember the first time I heard it, but it would have been probably like 8 years ago, I think. And I was just not receptive at all to it. I think I've had people along the years like try and gently expose me to it, and I just wasn't ready. And then our drummer in our band started working for Crypto Tax. And that was sort of like a little in where he was just giving us shit coins to buy and putting us in that side of it. And then like so many people, that didn't work at all for me. I lost some money and eventually just thought on the premise of like Bitcoin seems safer than the shit coins and started buying a little bit. But that was probably 2021. And then for the last, 3 years, just dollar cost averaging, just small amounts. And it wasn't until you and I started hanging out that I was kind of like, oh, there's something more to this. And that was exciting. And you were kind of like pretty slow and didn't just shove stuff in my face, but eventually reading the Bitcoin Standard made me go, oh, okay, this is cool.
I feel like you have to be so careful too when people are learning about this space, not to be too pushy, because there's such a natural reaction to that when there's something that you don't understand, and when someone comes from a place of a lot of knowledge. It's so hard when you believe in something so strongly, or when you really think it can help somebody, not to be pushy with it as well. It's such a hard balance.
You nailed it.
maybe with you, maybe not with some others.
I've also failed that the last couple of months with other people being a bit pushy.
Yeah,
too excited.
So talk to me about the moments where it started to click for you, where you moved from like starting to think about crypto, or starting to put some money into crypto, to that evolution of where you really felt like you got Bitcoin for the first time. What made Bitcoin make sense for you?
I think it was probably understanding what hard money was, which I didn't know what money was really. I just used currency, but didn't understand, something being scarce and, all the different, the qualities that people talk about with hard money. I didn't understand any of that. And it wasn't until the Bitcoin Standard I was kind of like, oh, currency is not that, obviously, if they can just print as much as they want of it. So sort of learning it from a point of view of what is good money first before understanding what Bitcoin was, and then seeing how it sort of aligned with all of those things. That's what made it like the light bulb go off.
Mm. And Bitcoin takes you down the rabbit hole of those topics like what is money? Why do we use money? And I mean, the Bitcoin Standard does a great job of walking you through that. And, there's some other books I've read about early money, about yapstones, about shells, about beads, about using, barter systems with
Mm,
livestock. And it's such a fascinating journey to go on and to learn about the history of money.
definitely.
And what was it about that journey, or at what point during that journey did you start to kind of come to understand what Bitcoin represented? Like, take us through that process a little more.
I think it, like for so many people, it made me realize how geared the system is against just everyday people. And that made me really angry at first. Um, and then it also made me really grateful that there's been something created that gives power back to people who are just like trying to save for a house or whatever. And especially being a musician, I usually funnel most of my money back into music, to record, to buy gear, to market, to do all of that stuff. So trying to save for a house as well, or save my time and energy in an abstracted form, like to do that hasn't been possible. And to realize that there was something that could do that for me and for me and my partner and my future and the potential of a family and all that kind of thing, it was overwhelmingly freeing. It sort of represented, yeah, like the potential to be free financially and to be able to manage my time better and to think more long term rather than constantly thinking about just the week to week. So it's a huge shift.
Mm. Yeah, I think for many, Bitcoin represents freedom. Bitcoin represents hope, particularly for us in Australia. We're around the same age, and there's such a paradigm around property and property ownership, and it's so out of reach for most people, and it can be really frustrating or really hard when that is what is seen as success, or that's often what's perceived as success,
Mm,
and it's out of reach for now like 80% of young Australians, or whatever that study showed a couple of weeks ago. I think it was the bottom 80% of wage earners can no longer afford an average or median house price. And so there's such a need to move beyond that idea as an individual and to think about what other opportunities you have for preserving your wealth, for long-term saving. And, you know, whether or not property should be a part of that plan, we could debate that too. But I think Bitcoin fits so nicely into that hole that, you know, uh, access to property leaves for many young people.
perfectly. Yeah, definitely. And then it, in the long term, leaves the house part of it as a utility rather than
Mm,
the investment strategy. I think sort of reversing those things.
mm. I wonder if our fiat money gained value over time instead of losing value over time, whether property would be nearly as financialized as it is.
Mm, surely not, because that
You would
seems
think
like
not.
so much of what people are trying to do when they buy second houses, unless it's a holiday
Mm.
house. So much of it seems like just trying to store wealth, right?
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at Sailor's little "Where is Global Wealth Stored?" like real
Mm,
estate is one of those biggest bubbles or biggest blocks. Is it three? I think it's 300 trillion in uh, in bonds and 500 trillion in real estate and property.
It's big.
I'll have to check that. It's huge, right? So definancializing that entire block is actually a massive thing to get your head around, I think.
Mm. And it's just, we're so far from that paradigm, like that full shift to that point where it is just a utility that most people just think it's ridiculous at the moment. But that's exciting for me, I think, especially being self-employed and having rough years where you're just trying to string things together because you're working hard on your craft. Like, there's an element of, whether or not you can't really help, like, well, I couldn't really help comparing myself to others as well, like not being able to have that thing that is deemed normal, having a house, being able to slowly work less overtime. Like, none of that seemed possible until the last 3 months. So it's pretty freaking cool.
It is cool.
Yeah.
How has studying Bitcoin changed your worldview so far?
It has lowered my time preference. It's made me, like I sort of mentioned before, it's made me stop thinking like week to week, like I have been for the last, since I was 18, just trying to make enough money to get by and to save for little things and to work on my music. And it's gone from being, thinking about weeks and months to let's think about what the next 10 years looks like for me and my family and my friends and for my business too. Like, be able to save and make music and also take a bit of the pressure off putting, all my eggs in, I need to get famous as fuck and then I'll be able to afford a house. Like, it's such a lofty goal that I still have. I still have that goal, but it's an enormous amount of pressure to have every time you drop a song. So it's shifted my worldview from being really like high time preference, like just worrying about getting by in the present, to definitely zooming out. And that's shifted even how I've been playing and writing and what I've been listening to as well. I think instead of trying to keep up with what's trendy in music or just looking beyond some of that and going back to why I got into music, which was like people who are really freaking good at playing music or really great songwriters. So that's been I don't know. I don't know even how to say it. It's been so big in terms of how I feel about playing and writing music again. It's like being 16 again and just starting to write music. It's pretty good.
That's cool. Hey, let's double click on that. What's changed for you in the last couple of months? In terms of your music, how have these ideas impacted what you're working on day to day?
I've been working a little bit less. I was definitely trying to like hustle pretty hard, and just making lots of beats as well. And I haven't been making as many beats. I've been sitting on the piano or with the acoustic, just writing songs, and it's affected even what I've been writing about as well. Like written a song about money, written songs about more deeply personal, internal things. Yeah, and that's been cool. It hasn't been scary. I used to think that was like cheesy or scary but I guess I was just didn't want to be vulnerable or didn't think I had a market for whatever I wanted to actually write about. But now I don't really care. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's that section in the Bitcoin standard where Safe takes an axe to fiat art, and he talks
Yeah.
about how, many generations ago, through the Renaissance, art was invested in, and he talks about architecture. He talks about a lot of these kind of similar disciplines that I think you can like take this same big takeaway from, which is about the value of true expertise and true mastery and mastery over time that's built up, that's earned, rather than things that are built quickly or things that are made quickly and don't
Mm.
have the same level of quality or workmanship. And yeah, I feel like that's such an easy idea to apply back to what you're working on as a musician too. I know that you took some stuff away from that.
Yeah, definitely. That chapter was like a big part of what gave me permission, I think, to be like, I don't have to. I can think like that. I think I'd forgotten that I could do that, and that it didn't have to be thinking about week to week, month to month with making music, and that it could be, it was okay to take years to really get a message across that I want to get across or whatever. And it's more fun too. If you take the
Mm,
pressure off a bit, I get to say what I really want to say, and hopefully it comes out clearer. It can connect better with people, and hopefully it just sounds better too. Like
mm,
qualitatively. I know it's subjective, but yeah, that's what I took away from that.
mm. And like putting that authenticity back in what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I don't know if you can ever fully take that away as a writer, but there's always this little devil in there that's like that. No one's gonna understand that line, or that line's shit. Like, make it more poppy, or I don't know,
Mm,
whatever. Just the ego part of it, rather than just trusting what I'm actually trying to get across and how I'm actually feeling, rather than what I think I should be feeling or what I should say, which is such a fundamental shift in the
mm,
approach. And yeah, I think that's why I've kept going down the rabbit hole, is that every time I've learned more about Bitcoin, it's relaxed that point of view more and more, and enabled me to zoom out more and more, which
mm,
is, it's like, yeah, it just is self reinforcing the more I learn about it.
mm.
And it's
It's
been cool,
cool.
like, talking to you as well, like, I've got some friends and I'm like sort of trying to orange pill them. Um, but to varying degrees of success. But it's been great, even though you're, yeah, doing your thing at the moment, being able to have someone I can get given good information constantly, because I'm constantly searching for it now as well.
Mm. Well, one thing we did the other day, which was cool, was your first Lightning transaction, and I sold you a surfboard,
Yeah.
and we paid for some of it in fiat and some of it in Bitcoin through Lightning. Yeah, talk to us about that learning experience and what that kind of unlocked for you.
I think it was just the fact that it was easy. You were like, get wallet of Satoshi, withdraw some funds into it, and we did it. It was instantaneous. And just having that, like, we're so early into the layer two stuff, and how well that already works, the implications of it in the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years. I don't know. It was just like, I think we were both kind of like, "Wow, that's pretty
Mm,
exciting and cool."
mm. And I shared that chart with you afterwards about Lightning Network, which is usage, which is really ticking up, which is
Mm.
super exciting. It would be great to see more vendors in Australia, particularly, accepting Bitcoin through Lightning. That would be really cool to see.
My question that I just thought of then is like, how does that work with the whole like capital gains structure and everything? Like if you're doing small payments like that, is that still set up where that's going to just sting you?
So I've heard some really interesting different takes on this. And if you, I'm not a tax guy, but as far as I understand, if you're making a disposal, i.e., you're selling or transferring Bitcoin to buy something, then that is a taxable event. And so, on one hand, I've heard people say it's really because if you use Bitcoin regularly and you acquire Bitcoin and you dispose of Bitcoin and you use it as a currency and a medium of exchange rather than a store of value, or you use a portion of your funds as a medium of exchange, when you are constantly, like buying and selling, when you have that kind of circular economy idea, then you're only going to pay capital gains on what would have been your overall kind of, I don't want to say like portfolio appreciation, but your as Bitcoin appreciates, you'll pay little bits of capital gains along the way, but you will
Mm.
kind of accrue cap gains. Um, but you'll be in a better position than you would have been if you just used fiat, which is, you know, devaluing it at 6 or 7% a year or whatever it is, right? So you'll still be
Yeah,
ahead. But on the flip side, it definitely creates some complexity for you in terms of tax reporting and in terms of what you, how you have to prepare that at the end of the year. In my opinion, tax is the primary barrier right now to Bitcoin as a medium of exchange
for sure.
because you can use stablecoins quite easily and they don't fluctuate very much against the Australian dollar, right? Even if you're using US dollar stable coins, and the Pacific peso has done pretty poorly this year, but you're not looking at really significant fluctuations in value. But I guess if you're going to prepare a tax return with all of those stablecoin buys and sells, then it probably is the same amount of work to do it with Bitcoin buys and sells. But over time, you're more likely to have your funds appreciate in value compared to fiat when you're using Bitcoin versus stable coins. So yeah, there's a few different ways to look at that, I think.
Mm. Yeah, it'll play out in its own way in the next, as it becomes more incorporated, right?
Mm. Yeah, and if the US goes ahead and gets rid of cap gains for Bitcoin, then that would be a huge move towards using it as a medium of exchange. Not
Yeah.
necessarily for us in Australia, but I think we'd see some much stronger adoption.
Mm.
But as well, like I think there are plenty of jurisdictions like New Zealand where cap gains is not a thing, and potentially you know we should be looking at those markets and what's going on in terms of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange to see how it is happening in a jurisdiction without those tax implications. So a few interesting ways to look at it. But at the core of it, right, it's education and development. It's being a vendor that accepts Bitcoin and being an individual who's willing to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. So it needs to come
Yeah.
from both sides too.
Yeah, it's just like adopting it even as a store of value. Like you got to lean in at some point, and I
Mm,
guess that translates across as to the next point of the medium of exchange.
mm. I know we've talked about like Bitcoin as a savings account. How are you thinking about, your stack and acquiring Bitcoin? Like, do you see it as a savings vehicle or do you see it as an investment? What's your perspective on that at the moment?
Um, I guess I'm pretty new to it, but at the moment, it's definitely just zoomed me out from thinking about trying to make a bit of cash and then pull it out to buy a microphone or a new laptop to make beats on. And it's
Mm,
turned into, let's think about 4 to 8 to 12 years and just being able to save what I can save while I'm still working on the career side of things, and know that I've got something that when I look at that sort of time horizon, it's going to appreciate and it's going to be able to help me move towards being independent, regardless of whether I have a huge song or whatever. So, and then whether or not it gets to the point where I sell it, or whether I can in the future use it as collateral to get a house, or I don't really know yet. I'm so new at it, but that's definitely how my brain's sort of thinking, is just stack whatever I can stack, and not even really think about it. I'm not worried about it pulling back or going up or whatever at the moment. It doesn't matter because I'm not going to touch it for a long while. So yeah, probably just the savings sort of vehicle is where my head's at, which is great because I've never had that. I've never been able to think that long term, because like you're saying, even before I understood anything about money, I inherently knew that whatever I saved in cash was going to devalue. And so that was a barrier to entry. It made me not give a shit. I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to afford to save for a house, because by the time, 3 or 4 years of saving and making music, I'm not going to be able to get a deposit for a house. So it's made that feel possible.
That's amazing. If you had some advice for someone who's, getting into Bitcoin, maybe is starting to, realize where the frustration might come from about, not being able to find a place to live, struggling with rent. What's your advice for someone who's just getting started with Bitcoin and these ideas?
I think, well, at least for me, it was let yourself go down the rabbit hole. Like, learn as much as you can about what this thing is, so that you can have the conviction to invest and save in it. And that conviction can't be, affected or battered by whatever the market's doing in the short term, because you understand the fundamentals of what it is, what it represents. I think for me, that's what changed between me just putting a bit of money in and hoping it went up and maybe I'd pull some out pretty quick. Like, it went from that to understanding what it actually meant in the long term. And that was, partly you sending me lots of stuff and listening to Bitcoin Standard, Jeff Booth's book, a bunch of other books, Broken Money, and some of the other stuff we've been talking about, before we had this call. Just like being hungry to learn about it. And then that in turn, could give someone who was just sort of on the edges of it, like, jump in. And then it gets exciting. Like you were saying to me the other day, I kind of said, like, man, does this feeling go away? Like, I'm pretty freaking pumped. Like, is this just a short term kind of thing? And you were like, it's been 4 years, or it's been whatever it's been for you, and you're more excited now than you ever have been. And I think that in itself is evidence of how great it is, but also how useful it is to learn about what it is. For me anyway. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. And that education process is just so much fun. And yeah, like I said to you the other day, it doesn't stop, because there's always more to read, and there's so much great content out there now too. Great discussions, not even just about Bitcoin, but about philosophically, where we're at as individuals, and why the need for this technology is so strong right now. And no matter what happens in the world, I derive so much like hope and optimism from this piece of tech. And it gives me so much hope, because I use Bitcoin and I save in Bitcoin, and it makes me really optimistic about, when more people are able to do this and unlock their own kind of dreams and goals and freedom, how the world will be a better place when that happens, and my
Yeah.
friends will be happier, and my family will be happier, and have more purpose. You know, it drives me. It gives me purpose for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I would echo that for sure. It's cool.
Mm. Well, we might call it there, but thanks so much for jumping on, mate. It was great to have you join chat
Thanks for
Bitcoin
having
like
me.
we do, and yeah, I'll catch up with you soon. Did you want to share quickly where people can look up your music as well, in return for taking the time?
Sure. Just search Jackson James Smith for my solo project on Spotify or anywhere you listen to music, or YouTube. And then I'm in a band called Buttered, like you buttered your toast, with my best mate Scotty. So we've got a bunch of songs on Spotify and YouTube and Apple Music and all of that too. If you're interested, we've got another record that we're just working on at the moment too, which will be out. We'll start releasing later this year.
He's a talented bloke. Thanks so much for jumping on, and have a great weekend, Binansians. Catch you next week.
Thanks, Lottie.
Please note that this discussion includes insights from non-affiliated third parties and key opinion leaders. Binance provides this platform for informational and educational purposes only and is not responsible for any content or insights provided. This information should not be considered as financial, tax, or investment advice from Binance.